I started working professionally in 1980, believe it or not. I started my career at Roger Corman's. The first movie I worked on was called Battle Beyond the Stars. And I was working with another newcomer at the time by the name of James Cameron. And I don't know whatever happened to him, but I'm doing really well. My name is Alec Gillis, and I am a practical creature effects designer. I was always interested in movies that were of a fantastical nature. My father loved films like that. He introduced me to the work of Ray Harryhausen. My dad would wake me up at like probably 9 p.m. When I was 5 years old. I remember he said, "You gotta come see this." He pulled me out and I stood in front of the TV kind of sleepy-eyed and watched skeletons come up out of the ground and sword fight. And it was just like burned in my brain. It was just such a weird concept, but also I was trying to figure out how it was done. And in retrospect, I think my father was probably prodding me and going, "How do you think they did that?" You know? And he was the one who explained to me that it was stop motion, one frame at a time, and the models were only this big. And so that kind of started my insatiable curiosity about special effects. And then when I was 12 or 13, I saw a magazine called Castle of Frankenstein, and it had Talos from Jason and the Argonauts on the cover. And I started flipping through it and just seeing all my favorite monsters, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, oh, that Cyclops, the Hydra, which is a phenomenal design still to this day. And I realized that it was all the work of one person, Ray Harryhausen. And that's when it really clicked in my head that, you know, people do this, and that that you can have a life of creative expression. And that was it for me. I was very fortunate as a kid to have two very supportive parents who got divorced. And the divorce was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, because my mother became very kind of encouraging and permissive of what I was doing, because, you know, she was now essentially raising me by herself. So she wanted to make sure that I had hobbies. So she allowed me to take over her two-car garage in Santa Ana. And I started building things there, stop motion puppets and makeups and little miniature sets and so on. And she even had the good judgment to take me to the local gun store to buy gunpowder so that I could make pyrotechnics and set them off in her garage. It all went well, and the movie is now a classic in the bottom of some waterlogged box somewhere on Super 8. But my father, on the other hand, he would take me to these movies on the military base, and we would go see like a triple feature, and they were all totally inappropriate movies. They were the Don't Tell Your Mother movies, you know, like Italian Dario Argento movies and all that kind of stuff. And I never gravitated towards the gore stuff, but I did get to see When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, which was stop motion, which was amazing Jim Danforth work. So all that stuff was kind of fueling my young brain. And I got a Minolta camera that could do slow motion, stop motion, fast motion, and I got some accessories and all that kind of stuff. So it really set me up from about age 13 through high school. I think I was a year out of high school, and I still had my workshop in my mother's garage. And a friend of my sister's who was working for Roger Corman happened to come over and see this workshop. And he's like, "Wow, you know, you've got talent. I could get you a job interview at Corman's if you're interested. We're working on a movie called Battle Beyond the Stars, and they need miniature builders, and, you know, you seem like a nice kid." And I said, "Okay." And so I made the appointment, and it was, you know, a few weeks away. And I started getting very nervous about it because I didn't have a proper portfolio or anything, you know. I was not very confident to start thinking of myself as a professional. So I had met a guy through a high school art teacher who was making films, and I went to visit this guy, and he had a portfolio. So I asked, could I bring a friend to the job interview? Because this guy, you know, he's also very talented. And I thought, well, I'll just like, he'll look professional and I'll look good. So James Cameron and I went to interview at Roger Corman's, and Jim had his portfolio and he kind of took over the meeting and all that, and I thought, this is going great. Like, I've got I'm making a good impression, just, he's putting all the effort into it. We didn't get hired for something like 9 months afterwards, and Jim told me years later it was because they thought he was obnoxious. That's why we didn't get hired. But we did eventually get hired, and we worked together on Battle Beyond the Stars, and he did phenomenal work on that. And it was a great, it's essentially a film school, Roger Corman's, for me. And I realized, because I was going to UCLA film school at the same time, and I ended up dropping out of UCLA because Corman's was giving me a much better, more well-rounded experience than UCLA did. And years later, UCLA would not call me back to come talk to the film students there, because apparently when you don't graduate, you can't consider yourself a Bruin. USC did call me in, though. I never went to USC. Then I applied there, and I didn't make it. I didn't make the cut to the USC Film School. And yet somehow they, not UCLA, called me back to come speak to the kids there. I don't know how these things work, but and I'm not bitter about it. I'm not bitter at all. I don't know what, no matter what those people in Westwood are saying, I'm fine with it. Sorry, that just petered out to a bullshit. I'm often asked, like, how do I do my job? What does it mean to be a creature effects designer, creature effects creator? And it is a wide-ranging job, and it's a kind of a wide-ranging skill set. I started off as an artist, a freelance artist, working for various studios and creative people, including Stan Winston, who was my mentor. I worked on Aliens and Predator, Monster Squad, a bunch of fun 80s movies for Stan. And I was a sculptor, I was a designer, I would do sketches, I would conceptualize. And as I developed my skills, I kind of moved into managing crews and managing entire effect sequences. And then the natural progression after that was to start my own company, which I did in 1988. I started Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, or ADI, with Tom Woodruff, who was my business partner. And then I made the shift a little bit more into art direction. So whereas I used to be very hands-on, I'd try to sculpt something in every movie we'd do, maybe the head of a creature or some prominent part of it. And that became less and less practical as the size of the jobs expanded. So probably by the time of Alien versus Predator, that job was so massive that it's just impossible to have your hands and your nose in clay and still be supervising the rest of the job. And that's okay. I just sort of transitioned into a different kind of artist, and I get great joy out of bringing teams of creative people together and seeing what they bring to the process. I direct the parameters, but I'm always interested to see, how far an artist can take something, given that it needs to perform to the specs of the script and what the director's looking for. But it's good because over the years I've been able to kind of remove my ego a little bit more from the process, because the films belong to the director. They're not my film. I have a great responsibility within those projects, but I'm there to support the storyteller, and I love having those relationships with directors, close creative relationships. It's a playground for me. I get to have the most talented people who design mechanical articulations. I get to have the best artists and sculptors, painters, mold makers, technical people, fur workers. There's so many different departments and so many wonderful, talented people. I'm very lucky to be in this position. The most challenging projects to me usually aren't the technical aspects of it, it's the human aspect. Like, the technical stuff is fun, the artistic creativity is fun. We as human beings complicate our lives. So that has become, as I've gotten older, I've realized that's the biggest challenge, is how do we work together to to create the best possible result. And I'm very pleased that my team has been together literally for decades in some cases. And so the communication is very easy, and I know exactly, where their strengths are, so we can capitalize on those. In terms of difficulty, Goro from Mortal Kombat was a very difficult character to create because I think we only had 3 months maybe, and it was a mechanical marvel that really had me stressing. But it was a good learning experience. But probably in terms of big scope, maybe the biggest job that we've done was the first Alien versus Predator, which had about 15 predators and about 15 aliens. Had a giant queen alien, had eggs and chest bursters. It was a lot of detail, but that was a very smooth running show. So luckily we had done that drill before on other Alien films. But I've had so many projects that were just wonderful experiences. I'm very lucky in that way. If you have a lot of bad experiences, it can kind of beat you down and make you jaded. And when I'm asked which of my creatures are my most favorite or which I'm most proud of, it's very difficult to pick because I associate success with not so much the success of the movie, although that's great, that is wonderful if it reaches a lot of people, but I associate it with like how satisfying was the process, who were the people I was working with. And then I guess over time, what movies resonate with people for the longest, deepest impact. And the place when I am reminded of the impact of this work in general, and my work specifically, is when I go to a convention and somebody says, "Hey, look at this," and they pull up their sleeve and they've got a tattoo of some creature I designed. Pumpkinhead is one. Like, not a lot of people know about Pumpkinhead, but the ones who do know about it are absolute nuts for it. And I love that because it was a little low-budget movie, Stan Winston's directorial debut. We had a blast on it. It was almost too much fun to think like, is this really going to be a good movie? Because it's so fun to work on. But it has become a cult favorite. And I was at a convention, a guy had a tattoo of Pumpkinhead on his arm, and he had me sign under the tattoo, and I thought, okay, one shower and that's gone. And he runs over, he says, and he runs over to there was a tattoo booth, and he got my signature tattooed on his arm under Pumpkinhead. And I thought two things. I thought, this is amazing to have had this kind of impact on someone. And this guy needs mental health care desperately. Let's see, how long have I been doing this? It is going on, let's see, what's the math? 43 years? Staying in the business for as long as I have, and as long as I intend to, which is until I drop dead. You have to constantly look for ways for the work to stay fresh and exciting. And I have a lot of ways that it still is exciting. Like, I always look forward to it. When a project comes in, I just look forward to working with these people I've got, with my crew. And to be able to go out and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the mission. And everybody gets excited and we gear up, and it's a blast. It's like you're going to climb the Himalayas together or something. And then I also love working with young filmmakers. And at this point, almost every filmmaker is younger than me. I used to be a whiz kid, right? I used to be like too young to be in the business. And people would sort of poo-poo you because you couldn't have experience or whatever. And now I'm on the other end of that, and it's been a fascinating journey. And it's a really nice place to be. I mean, to have a big body of work to point to, and to have people who know my work without me having to sit down and show them a portfolio or like pitch myself. They're already familiar with the work. Not only is it an ego stroke, which is nice, but it's a great shorthand communication because they can refer to things I've done in the past. And I want to hear what didn't work for them as well as what did work for them. In terms of influences and inspiration, there are plenty of things to be inspired by now. I think that with social media, for all the bad stuff it brings, you can certainly find tons and tons of good stuff. And Instagram has opened my eyes as to how much talent there is all over the world. That's inspiring to me, and humbling. And it kind of puts you into a perspective that if other artists had had the opportunities that I've had, they could be in my shoes as well. And so it sort of puts it in perspective that I value where I am more. So I want to do right by all those struggling artists, and I want to do right by the artists that I employ, and I want to just continue making great characters for films for as long as I possibly can. I started off in life collecting comic books. When I was really little, like 9 years old, I wanted to be a comic book artist. Then as I segued into actually becoming a professional and making things for movies, I collected weird things that would be like references for sculptures. Like, you know, I had like castings of ostrich feet and, you know, Guy the gorilla from the London Zoo. Somebody had a face cast of that, and those oddities I kind of preferred. I don't, at this point in my life, I don't collect things from movies. And I say that, but I'm surrounded by stuff from my own films. But I don't have things at home. I don't surround myself with it. I don't know if it's because I like having this place as a place of all that creativity. I don't need to be looking at it 24 hours a day. I'm just in a different position, I think, than a lot of collectors are. I love that people collect stuff. I always think of it as a little bit like religion, right? Like a theater is sort of like a church. You go to the theater and you have a moving, emotional experience in the way that people who go to church have that moving experience. Then, in order to recapture that feeling of emotion and the swell and inspiration and the great feeling you had when watching the movie, you have your idol, right? Like you have a statue of your saint, whatever. It might be Iron Man. This is going to get me in trouble, isn't it? Both with Marvel and the Catholic Church. Great. Honestly, I used to think like, wait, people are collecting all this? Why? Look at all the money you spend on that crap. But now I understand that it keeps you in touch with your imagination. That's very important for people. And I'm very happy to be part of that. If somebody has a little figure of you know, some character that I've worked on or designed, that's pretty great. I've helped that person tap into that you know, cosmic collective imagination that all human beings have. But myself, I don't really collect. Advice I give to young artists, it's difficult to give advice because the landscape is so different than when I got in. You know, like when I got in, I think there was very little information on how to make things and how to build things. You know, you had to kind of trial by error, and you had to slog through all the mistakes and drive around to find the materials. The delivery systems weren't quite there. And then now there is much more access to information. So you can have success at creating things early, but you also have more competition. There's more people doing it. Like when I was young, I felt like I was all by myself. I discovered that there were conventions, and you'd go there and like, oh look, these people make masks too, and there was a little bit of a community there, but nothing like there is today. So there's positives in both scenarios. My advice though to young artists is to, first of all, learn traditional art. And that doesn't necessarily even mean that you have to go to classes or what have you, because I know some really brilliant artists that never took an art class in their life, but get proficient at it, at sketching, sculpting, painting, you know, as much as you can. But then also learn the digital tools as well. Learn the ZBrushes and Photoshop, painting software and all that kind of stuff. Be a well-rounded artist, because even if you're just doing it for yourself, the bigger your toolkit is, the more fun you're going to have. And if you're planning to become a professional, the bigger your toolkit is, the more likely you will be to get hired. You got to have a great attitude. You got to have a thick skin, especially if you're going to go into it. If you're not just doing it in your room for yourself, and that's fine, you know. But if you're going to make things that you're presenting to a client or to a supervisor or to the public in hopes of, getting paid for it. It has to satisfy something other than just yourself. And also, if you can learn some business too, that's the most difficult thing for artists, I think, is we're naturally kind of introverted because in order to get good at your skill, you have to spend time with yourself and in your own head and doing the thing, right? Which means that you, by nature, have to disconnect yourself from other people. And that kind of can stunt us in a way. It stunts us in how we communicate, how we sell ourselves. We have this idea that we're too bashful then to like get out there and pitch yourself and sell yourself. But if you're gonna make a living at it, you really have to. You have to be a really good salesperson and then also learn some things about managing money, saving money, managing money, what to spend on, what not to spend on. I don't advise that you collect things because it's expensive. When you work in the movie business, you work with some very passionate people, and some of them are legendarily passionate, and a lot of directors are that way because they have to be. They have to have that amount of energy to carry them through 2 years of production making a movie, and I always try to support the director. Paul Verhoeven is a guy who I would call extremely passionate. I worked for Paul on Starship Troopers and Hollow Man, and he is, I don't know, some people have called him a raving lunatic. I think that's unfair. I think Paul is extremely passionate and he expects you to be just as passionate. But I remember there was a time when on Starship Troopers when they were going to shoot this scene with the brain bug, which is the giant creature that controls all the bugs, right? And we had the cast, the cast was ready to go, it was going to shoot the next day. And I had told production that we needed 2 full days to get our bug from the base camp down through these kind of treacherous paths through Wyoming, the desert of Wyoming, down into these canyon badlands. It's got to be set up just so, and then we have to rehearse it. So in the process of that, it took a full day just to get the creature trucked from its previous location. So basically the schedule was all screwed up. We had this incredible thunderstorm that came up right in the middle of the move where we had to like take the thing apart and cover it up. It was really like everything was aligned against us. So on the day before, we had just gotten it set up and Paul Verhoeven came out to inspect it, and I said to him and the producing team, I said, I just have to tell you all that we just got this installed and we have not had our full day of rehearsal. So if there's any way that you could rearrange the schedule so that, and before I even got that out, Paul was in my face. He was livid, but he was staring me right in the face saying, "Are you telling me that you have not rehearsed this creature as agreed upon?" And I knew him well enough to know that he was searching for any sign of fear or trepidation. So I did not break contact and I did not blink, and I said, "Yes, Paul, that's exactly what I'm telling you." And he said, "What is the reason for this?" And I explained to him, we've had weather, we've had blah, 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 blah. And I thought he was just gonna like fire me on the spot. He was just so angry. And he looked at me for a second, and then he turned around and yelled at the producers and said, "Shame on all of you for not giving this man the time that he needs." And he stormed off and stood by a boulder with his back to us and thought about it. And then he came back and he said, "All right, we're gonna shoot something else tomorrow and we'll come back to you, that'll give you a full day." Cool. And we walk away, and one of the producers who'd just gotten yelled at comes up to me and he says, "Why didn't you just lie?" And I said, "Because I'm not a producer." Well, I started my career around the time of Road Warrior that Mel Gibson was in. So I, for my entire life, have heard, "Oh, you look like Mel Gibson." And that was cool for a while until people started to tell me I looked like Mel Gibson's mugshot. And that, I think, is where I'm going to draw a line. I love Mel Gibson, But it's interesting. You know, I have all these, if you go to my Instagram, did I mention Alec_Gillis? You'll see pictures of me from the 80s on, and I'm kind of, I've gone through my Mel Gibson phase, I think, and now I'm becoming more, well, people have told me I look like Will Ferrell now, and also Simon Cowell. Moving forward with this creature work that I've been doing now for 4 decades, I'm not done yet. And even though my previous company is now a thing of the past, I started a new venture called Studio Gillis. And that is essentially the same as it's always been, which is me making monsters with my favorite people. So look for that new name in the credits coming up soon. We've done a few projects and you'll start seeing that. I also have another company under the same roof that is a miniature effects company called Pro Machina. And we've done a few projects now that you'll be seeing coming up soon. But what I love about this is that I get to live my dream of having both miniature and full-scale effects under one roof. So it gives me joy to know that I'm keeping this art alive. I'm helping keep it alive. There's a lot of us that are out there working very hard to bring you real stuff, real effects. So hopefully you'll stick with us in this continuing adventure. The timing of starting Studio Gillis was kind of interesting. My business partner and I had agreed to fold up the previous company, and that was my cue to start a new company. But it was just about a couple of months before the writer's strike started. So for the next 7 months then, we had the writers and the Screen Actors Guild strike happening. So that's been a little rough. I moved into a nice big 11,000 square foot facility and realized that the jobs were not necessarily going to come in. So I don't really mind talking about this stuff because I think that a lot of times we, as artists, like to kind of show all the fun and, you know, the inspirational stuff, which is good. That's the most important aspect. But a lot of people are interested in how do you survive as a business? What's the business model for a creature effects studio? When there is a strike happening, there is no income. I mean, there are some things that were outside the strike. Like luckily, we worked on a music video that had a cool character in it. Music videos weren't covered. They weren't part of the streaming thing, so we could do that. I did do some effects for the Fede Alvarez Alien movie that started before the strike, so I was able to kind of, that helped us. But there have been times during this strike like, oh, this is a day like Uncut Gems, like what Adam Sandler's character went through. And it's stressful, you know. I have this habit, I chew my thumbs. My crew knows this about me. They know when I'm dealing with anxiety, they just look at my thumbs. And I try not to take it out on them, I just chew my thumbs. So there's a lot of thumb chewing days during the strike. I know that there's a lot of negativity towards the unions for striking. I'm technically in both of those unions, although I'm only active in the Screen Actors Guild. And I have to say that this was a turning point. I mean, like for a long time, the streaming networks have been able to kind of like just not report to anybody what their true income is. And to hide that from people is a little, you know, it's not cool. AI is another thing that, you know, particularly actors have to be very careful about, but everybody does to an extent, but actors really have to be careful about it. So I understand why the strikes had to happen. It's just tough because it really affects a lot of other people in other unions as well. So all I can say is that I'm very glad that it's over, that it resolved. It seems to have resolved pretty well. So yeah, tough time, in debt, chewed thumbs. I think that's the wrap up. As far as social media goes, you'll only find me on Instagram, Alec_Gillis. But you might want to check out our YouTube channel, which was from my previous company, ADI, Studio ADI's channel on YouTube. We have over 300 videos there of behind-the-scenes footage of how we did all this movie magic going back decades that you might find interesting. As much as I try to control my ego, yeah, I'm very proud of what I've achieved. I've kind of like done what little 12-year-old Alec set out to do, which was to become a monster maker, to make a living at it and to be good at it. And I feel like I have done that, but I haven't by any means done it alone, you know. For 34 years, I had a creative and business partner in Tom Woodruff in the previous company, ADI, and I still have people who work with me and for me on my crew who've been with me for decades. So if I were to have been a solo artist, you know, and sort of like maybe like a Dick Smith, you know, was a little bit more of a solo, smaller scale, I don't know that I would have taken it as far as I did. I feel like as much as I was a loner in the beginning, I'm so glad that I included other people into the process, because I've been able to have a lot more fun and get a lot more done that way. Caroline McFarlane Watts, that's the one that, the artist that inspires me the most. She's got a nickname, we call her Shortbread.